Now on to our main issue round. In this portion of the show, we look at one issue in depth. Tonight we'll be discussing Barack Obama's presidency, its lasting effects, and how he will be judged by history. One of the major scandals of Obama's presidency was that the IRS had been targeting far-right groups for audit. Meanwhile, the head of the IRS, Lois Lerner, had visited the White House every third day for a year before the scandal broke. Nobody lost their job over the incident. Other scandals include failure to act during the attack on the consulate in Benghazi, the Fast and Furious operation, spying on reporters' phone records at the Associated Press and Fox News, the failure of heavily subsidized green energy company Solyndra, and multiple spending scandals involving the VA and GSA conferences. In fact, Eric Holder, Obama's former attorney general, was brought up on perjury charges twice for lying about two of these scandals. Is this really an administration that should be the precedent for future presidents?
I think in the modern era, just how big government it is, I mean, any president is going to have a few scandals, right? A few of them that you mentioned are like legitimate mistakes by the Obama administration. What I argue and what most liberals argue is that by and large, all of the positive things that President Obama has done far outweigh those little speed bumps.
You say speed bumps, but people had their lives turned upside down. Like Tea Party groups had an audit show up at their door for one day, had no idea why, had to cease everything they were doing. In fact, I remember an Onion article that came out while this was happening, right?
An Onion article.
An Onion article saying, Tea Party quiet, too quiet. And it just turned out to be a coincidence that, hey, they're actually being audited.
Yeah.
Onion actually hit it nail on the head.
I'm sorry, I'm still just trying to register quoting the Onion right now.
All right. But in all actuality, these people had audits show up, and audits kind of put your whole life on hold while you have to justify everything you've spent. Benghazi, 4 people died, and the president was nowhere to be seen. His Secretary of State blamed it on something that it wasn't, actively lying about it to the families. Fast and Furious, a border guard was killed because of that. You say there's speed bumps, but people have died because of these. I mean, I just see like a big difference between speed bumps and people losing their lives and livelihoods.
All right, well, so the problem that I have with you saying that we can lay the blame of all these things like right at the feet of President Obama, the IRS is a huge organization, you know? I don't think that President Obama was like being the leading advocate for doing all of those things.
When the head of the IRS met with him every third day for a year, just about, according to White House logs.
I could see how the Democratic Party would do what you're talking about. I don't see how President Obama would do what you're talking about.
You don't go to the White House to meet with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. You go there to meet with President Obama.
Yeah, but that being said, I don't think that the marching orders came from President Obama. I mean, obviously, there's no way to substantiate that.
Yeah, I mean, but at the very least, he was involved.
But looking at the president by himself, not with these subsidiary agencies that, you know, are semi-autonomous, I think that when you look at what President Obama has done himself compared to these small little hiccups from, you know, his underlings, I think that he will be remembered as a great president. It seems to me that the reasons that the right says that Obama was a bad president are relatively short-lived. You know, momentary declines in the economy, ISIS, which is just one of the many terrorist organizations that's sprung up in the Middle East that we've had to fight, and of course the Benghazi scandal. But most of what liberals point to as his accomplishments are long-lasting changes. The first African-American president, ending 2 wars, the legalization of gay marriage. Does this mean that while the Republicans may not like him now, he will be remembered 100 years from now as being a good president?
Now, let's break this down. You say he stopped 2 wars, which would, I'm assuming you're referring to Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, we're still fighting Afghanistan. That war is not ended. Iraq, we just sent 2 Marine detachments to fight ISIS. Now, ISIS was a direct result of Obama pulling out of Iraq early. All of his advisors told him not to. They said, now's not the time, we're not finished. He pulled out, the president put in all his buddies in, and then ISIS sprung up as a result of that.
I think the problem was that we invaded them in the first place. And
well, yeah, but now we're dealing with this whole other thing. Would you rather deal with ISIS just kind of messing around or Saddam Hussein posing risk to everyone around him? That's a whole nother issue. But we're talking about Obama's legacy. He pulled out of Iraq, and it led directly the ISIS
So what else is he going to do? To keep fighting an unwinnable war for the whole 8 years of his presidency?
I think a lot of this originated in Syria. In 2013, Barack Obama said he made his famous red line speech, or infamous, said if chemical weapons are used, there will be serious consequences. Put on his, tough face, looked right in the camera and said there will be serious consequences. Assad dropped a chlorine bomb on civilians. Nothing happened. I think a lot of that showed that he is a weak president on foreign policy. Following that, Putin moved into Ukraine. The Chinese have gone into the South China Sea, set up bases in the South China Sea, which is disputed territory, and multiple other things have happened. He's a weak president. I mean, I don't think there's any. And whenever people call him out on it, he says, "I got Bin Laden." He got Bin Laden like I scored the winning shot of the Villanova UNC game. Watched it on a TV. So I don't think he's a very strong president.
I think that when it comes to foreign policy, the kind of foreign policy that we should be having is, I don't want to say weakness is strength, because it's not even weakness, but sometimes like pure muscle isn't the only strength that we have to flex, I think that President Obama got into office in 2008 and saw that we were in,
2009.
Yeah, 2009. But he got into the presidency and saw 2 wars that didn't look like they were going to end anytime soon. And I think that the reason that he didn't do anything when they crossed that red line is that he thought that it would lead to another war like that. And I would agree with that sentiment.
Well, he could have done what Jordan done. Jordan went in, bombed it, made their statement, and got out. It doesn't have to be a ongoing, conflict. It has to be then he should not have said it if he didn't plan on doing anything.
Please tell me what positive change would be affected by us going in, bombing them, and leaving.
I didn't say there was, but I said if you're going to make that statement, you better be prepared to back it up. Obama's whole thing is that he does stuff just to kind of look cool, but doesn't think about the long-term effects. He doesn't think about, what is actually happening by me doing this. He pulled out of Iraq to say, hey, I pulled out of Iraq. Look at Iraq now. Just recently, he went to Cuba to say, hey, we've mended relations. When in reality, Cuba is terrible on human rights. He could have said, hey, we should be buddies. I have no problem with us being buddies, but you're going to have to change some stuff. And he has the power to do that, but he won't do it.
I think that soft power is by far the U.S.'s best weapon. Better than the military, I would say. Soft power, by that I mean diplomacy. And I think that President Obama has tried to affect change through diplomacy rather than through pure force, which some people don't really like too much. But from my perspective, I think that him not being too quick to go into military action has saved us from involving ourselves in even more conflicts that could turn into another quagmire like Iraq and Afghanistan.
There's a difference between being too quick to go into military actions and backing up what you say you're going to do. I don't think he should have said, there's a red line, we're going to mess you up, if he had no intention of doing it. Now, and as for diplomacy, he was caught in 2012 on an open mic telling Medvedev, who was president of Russia at the time, a month before Putin took over again, I'll have more flexibility after my election. Look what's happened since then. Russia's moving up into Ukraine, testing NATO's alliance because he knows Obama's a weak president.
Well,
he's pushing every limit he can. He's flying bombers off the coast of California.
Well, Russia recently pulled out of Syria, correct?
Yeah, they did.
Why?
I think they had a lot of stress at home because of it.
Well, I mean, they invaded Ukraine. I mean, the Russians seem to be, fully into getting into wars. So why?
They've denied it on every front that they've invaded Ukraine, even though Russian agents have been called multiple times. They think they're sneaky. You can't be sneaky. There's the internet.
You're not sneaky,
you can't get away with this. Who do you think you are? They pulled out of Syria, and that's because that was a lot of international pressure. It's because the Russians were striking the rebels that we were arming, and we're like, hey, that's a bad investment. So naturally,
I think the reason that the Russians pulled out is that they saw that they couldn't help the situation by staying there and bombing people. And I think that President Obama realizes that we're a world leader and we have the obligation to help in the conflict. But I think that what you're saying, that he's not showing strength, is actually looking out for the American people to ensure that we don't get involved into another quagmire.
Now, I disagree with that completely. The Russians have had no problem bombing civilians. Look at their entire history. They have no problem with collateral damage. The reason they went into Syria is to protect, they have multi-billion dollars worth of assets there. It's a lot of Russian money is in Syria. So I think they went to protect their assets, protect their ally. I think the reason they pulled out, and they haven't fully pulled out, they've only pulled out a fraction of their forces. They left a bunch of advising, stuff like that behind, was because they didn't want, I think they felt like they were kind of bumping the limit on how much of America's military was gonna, the DOD and the CIA was gonna put up with. Because they were directly bombing the people we trained and armed, the ones who hadn't defected to the Taliban.
Let's shift from foreign policy, and I just have a list here of all the like pertinent accomplishments that I think that President Obama made, and I just want you to tell me what you think about these. So he decreased the unemployment rate from 10% at the height of the recession to 4.9% now.
Do you mind if we go like step by step?
If you want to.
All right, yeah. So the unemployment rate is one thing. I think half of that going down was people leaving the workforce. The other half was the baby boomers retiring. If you look at the labor participation rate coupled with the unemployment rate, the labor participation rate drops just as much as the unemployment rate. So a lot of that is people retiring or leaving the workforce. It's not people going back to work.
Do you really think that that would account for a 5% difference?
Not all of it. I think half to 2/3 of it is people leaving the workforce.
I would blame it on the stimulus. But all right, so moving on, help legalize gay marriage.
Well, that is one thing I don't, necessarily disagree with. It depends on your religious views, whatever. But one thing I find funny is Democrats, who are always talking about our democracy or whatever, had to overrule state rulings that were voted on by the people of the state. I think that's kind of funny, but
Yeah.
it's one of his accomplishments. He can
But
put
I
on
mean,
his
that
resume.
specifically is one of the things that when kids are learning in textbooks from like 50 to 100 years from now, that's going to be one of the main accomplishments.
Yeah, it's one of his accomplishments. He can bathe in it or whatever. I don't know.
I think it's one of
bask in it.
I think it's one of the bigger ones. Okay, on to the next one. He dropped oil prices from.
But was that really his accomplishment? That was more the Supreme Court, though.
Yeah, I kind of agree with
So-
you on the Supreme Court. But I mean, that being said, he was making strides towards that, and the Supreme Court kind of just finished the rest of it for him. Okay, so moving on. He dropped oil prices from $4.45 a gallon at the beginning of his presidency to less than $2 now.
He had literally nothing to do with that. Oil prices are so low right now because there's an oil glut. Every oil-producing country in America in the world. Sorry, I get a little mixed up between the two. In the world is pumping out oil at an extreme rate, causing prices to dump.
OPEC, right?
OPEC, Russia, African countries,
Well,
all around here, everyone's pumping out oil. So it's basic economics. If there's a huge supply, price is going to drop.
foreign oil though, right?
Foreign oil and American oil.
So do you know that President Obama dropped our dependence on foreign oil to the lowest it's been since 1970?
I'm sure he has, but at the same time, we're still competing with them. We're shipping it out. It's still competing. It affects our gasoline prices. The Cushing inventories, it's in Oregon, I believe. It's where all the oil that's pumped out of America is sent to, has the highest inventory it's had in forever because it has to compete with everyone on the world. We're at a time where the actions of people, in Africa, China affect us. So I don't think he has had any impact whatsoever on gas prices.
Okay, you're gonna like this next one. He killed Osama bin Laden.
God, I love this one. No, he didn't. He had 2 shots before that to kill him. Him saying, yeah, go get him, was like, no, he had nothing to do with that.
I mean, President Bush wasn't able to make any strides in that regard.
Because neither of them had it. Neither did Obama. Neither of them had it. Happened on his watch. It's like saying President Bush was directly responsible for the subprime crisis. They're irrelevant. It just happened under his watch.
All right, to be fair, I think that President Bush is responsible for the subprime crisis.
It's Clinton and Greenspan's fault, but anyway.
All right.
Agree to disagree. Anyway, no, it was the CIA. The CIA found them. The SEALs went and got him.
Operating under his orders, though.
He said, go get them. They said, hey, he's here. And he said, go get him.
A big policy change that you'll see from the Bush administration to the Obama administration is that I think that under the Obama administration, they kind of realized that Pakistan isn't really our ally and that they're holding, like Bo Bergdahl was held in Pakistan.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Osama bin Laden was, a mile away from a base in Pakistan.
No.
So I think that he does have he owns a little bit of that because I think that his administration kind of understood that and started making moves to.
Now, I'm gonna kind of disagree. Pakistan's all about like who's gonna suck up to it the most. They're all about basically survival. Who's
Yeah.
gonna give them the most? Yada yada whatever. Now he sent them in. They got Osama. It wasn't sneaky. They kind of of course the bird going down wasn't really planned, but kind of showed up, kind of rubbed it in Pakistan's face in the victory speech. Like we got him in Pakistan, yada yada. Soon after that, Pakistan signed a $10 trillion deal with China. A trade deal, set up Chinese ports, Chinese highways through the country to circumvent India. Now, is that a direct effect? No, but it weakened our relationship with the Pakistani government.
As far as I'm concerned, our relationship with the Pakistani government, and especially their intelligence
It's always been
office,
rocky.
has
It's
been
always been very
awful.
rocky, but I think that didn't help.
So moving on from that, he ended 2 wars in the Middle East.
Then why are we still fighting in those 2 places?
Because the nature of the conflict that we involved ourselves in under the Bush administration, the only way that will end is with a power vacuum and with another militant group taking it.
You didn't ask about Bush. You said Obama ended 2 wars, but here we are fighting in both places still.
We don't have thousands and thousands and thousands of troops in both. We're not occupying 2 countries.
We have a division of Marines sent to Iraq the last week. We've had special forces running around Iraq and Syria for a while, and we never stopped in Afghanistan. I'm not sure where you got that from.
I think that the wars, when we waged them, were unjust, and I think that President Obama, by recalling the troops, was making the best decision that he could in his position. It's just the nature of the situation. It's extraordinarily unstable. But what he was trying to do was to take American involvement out as much as possible.
When we left Iraq, all of President Bush's defense advisors told him it was a bad idea. They said, if you go, it will crumble. And yeah, part of that is blame is on Bush. Bush trusted the president of Iraq way too much. And his advisors also told him this isn't a trustworthy
As well
guy.
as former Halliburton CEO and Vice President Dick Cheney.
What a guy.
Trusted him too. Yeah, right?
Oh, yeah. Shotgun Cheney. Anyway, all the advisors told him not to leave Iraq, yet he did, and he left Iraq. Said, "Yeah, we won this war," but look
let's
what
talk
happened.
about mission accomplished
Okay.
real quick. Come on now.
All right, so okay, well they're both equal in my eyes because they didn't mean anything.
Talking about declaring an early victory there.
Yeah,
At least he
let's
didn't
go
land
back
on
to
an
Bush.
aircraft carrier
Okay.
somewhere. Oh, I always go back
Yeah,
to
he's
Bush.
not that cool. All right, so
That was pretty baller. I'll say that.
it was freaking ballers all get out there. So he said, yeah, the Iraq war's over. Everything's great. The president of Iraq, now that America's gone, kicked out all the, I get them mixed up. I think he's Sunni. Kicked out all the Shia people in his government, brought in Sunnis. The Shias were like, what the heck, dude? Like, we're disenfranchised. Started cracking down on the Shias. Eventually, it came to a point where they were having a big rally. The government came in. Their fighting broke out, and that was the original start of ISIS. Was directly because this president decided to crack down on the opposition. So I think if we had stayed a little longer, maybe rearranged the government.
Define stay a little longer.
Until it's done. Until it's done and we can leave and it not be a bloodbath.
So when the nation is built to the point that it can sustain itself,
I think it needs to be a slow drawdown.
it would be decades if we stayed there until we established 2 fully functioning states that could support themselves in the Middle East.
Well, I
Decades.
feel like this is us just looping around to what we talked about last
Yeah.
episode about going in with a full plan. And yeah, when we went into Iraq, there wasn't a full plan. However, leaving when we did, it was premature.
All right. Moving on to another big issue in the Obama presidency, he was able to pass healthcare reform.
He passed it on the whole, it was a famous thing, is like, you won't pay more for your health care. Millions of people who supported him found out, yeah, you are paying more for your health care. I don't agree with the law. I think it moves it more towards a socialist system. But I think what we need to see to solve this is have take away I hate to use this because Trump says it, this just sounds so dumb, but take away the lines around the states and let people, compete. I don't think the solution that he proposed was the best solution.
Well, that's debatable. But regardless of which way you err on that. Just the prospect of passing healthcare reform was something that other presidents, they couldn't even think about accomplishing. So that's just something in its own right. Moving on.
Well, it was passed under a Democratic majority in both the House and Senate, so
All right, so moving on,
I don't think it was that difficult.
he also won a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, in like the first year of office for like nothing.
Yeah.
He just went around. He went around and was like, "Sorry, America's been like a jerk all these years," and then they gave him one. So I don't know why that. I don't know.
It's still a
To
Peace
me,
Prize winner.
It kind of delegitimizes the whole prize to me because he didn't really do anything before earning it. Now, after his presidency, whether he earned it during his presidency could be debated, but he came in, promised all this stuff during his campaign, was in office for about a year, and somehow they gave him a Peace Prize.
He also caused a record 66 months of consecutive overall job growth.
Was that him causing that? That was a stimulus. You give government. All right. Well, I mean, yeah.
Which
you
he-
give. Sorry, I had to think about that. All right.
Yeah.
So you give corporations money. Naturally, they're going to like start hiring people, but it's artificial. It's Keynesian policies. If you just throw money at a corporation, they're going to hire people, but are they still going to be providing the products, providing the goods and services?
Is the economy better off now than when he took office?
It's artificial. We're headed for another recession.
Elaborate.
Many experts agree. Junk bonds are at the same price they were pre-2009. We have the same amount of risky debt held by corporations pre-2009. The 5% unemployment rate is fictitious. It's not. Okay, it's not. I mean, I mean, I believe, and besides, oil's low right now, but when someone cuts production, it's going to skyrocket back up. I don't think his presidency is going to end on a high note for the economy.
So do you think the stimulus worked then?
It worked for Ford. I don't think it worked for the overall economy.
I think it worked for the American people, just looking at unemployment rates and things
Temporarily.
of that nature.
It was a temporary Band-Aid on an overarching problem.
Well, so
I mean, look at what we've got going on. You watch TV, you see Rocket Mortgage, which is the exact same thing that caused the two. I mean, it's been 8 years. Like, come on.
All right, well,
I mean,
the
I mean,
thing is, though, Democrats overwhelmingly have been the ones that are for Wall Street reform, right? And they passed the Dodd-Frank Act. And I would say all the negative things that you're talking about are still around because Republicans pushed for those things to happen when they were making the Dodd-Frank bill.
I would disagree. Dodd-Frank separated, just for the people at home, Dodd-Frank separated investment banking and retail banking. Now, if that had actually happened, or excuse me, excuse me, other way around. Yeah, other way around, sorry. So now that they're one and the same, it didn't have anything to do with subprime mortgages. So the people up in Wall Street weren't saying, yeah, give people who like can't afford homes mortgages, or sorry, can't afford to pay the mortgages off mortgages. That was passed by Clinton, who wanted to pass affordable housing, and it was defended by Pelosi and Harry Reid up until 2008 to provide low-income people with affordable housing. But in reality, what happened is mortgages that couldn't be paid off. People were paying their mortgages with a second mortgage. So that's why the bubble happened, is all these mortgages were being bought up by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and then people were buying them as investment-grade mortgages, when in reality, there was no money behind them. So all that crumbled down, and Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi had been defending it the whole time. So, history lesson. You're welcome, America.
The argument that I hear most from conservatives about President Obama is that he drastically increased the national debt and the budget deficit. Is this the result of President Obama's actions alone, or does the prior administration hold some of the blame?
No, yeah, the prior administration holds some of the blame. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were expensive.
Why?
Yeah, okay. Oh, I disagree. Because the executive office presents the budget to Congress every year. The budget is what decides how the money's spent. So when the money has been doubling I believe Bush only added $6 trillion. Obama has added $9 trillion so far. It's gone from 10.6 to 9.2 trillion. So I think, yes, a lot of the blame is on him. Part of it is on Bush, but I don't think Bush put enough momentum to double it.
Well, most of that from President Obama is from the stimulus, correct? Like trying to correct
I believe
the
that
economy.
money was paid back.
Well,
The bailout money to Wall Street was all paid back. I believe Ford paid it back.
Well,
I don't
so
see how we're still in debt from that.
when President Bush came into office, he had the first budget surplus in decades. And when he left with a $400 billion deficit. So, I mean, in my opinion, the spending that President Obama has okayed, he was forced to do that spending in the way of continuing 2 wars for a little bit of his presidency and having to do the stimulus to clean up the economic mess left from President Bush.
Yeah, but most of the stimulus money was paid back at a profit. So there's that, and then there's also the Iraq War, which I believe ended in 2011, I think. And yeah, that did cost some money to end to ship everything out. But I don't see how just those 2 things are responsible for $9 trillion of debt.
I mean, obviously he's a Democratic president, so he's going to be into spending a little bit more money. I think that part of it, though, is a very small portion of what the net spending difference has been with the Obama presidency. I think that his hand was forced for the vast majority of it.
Just to, just so we're on the same, all right, so Bush spent $8 trillion in 8 years, and Obama in 7 has spent 9 as a direct result of Bush. I don't really see the logic behind that.
Well, Bush got us into the 2 wars, and in my opinion, he created the housing bubble that caused the economic collapse.
I disagree. Clinton and Greenspan calls that. But yeah, money had to be spent there. But however, all that money that was spent to the banks was paid back at a profit, like I have said already. Ford has paid it back. I believe Chevy and GM weren't able to pay it back. So I don't think that. Okay, so we're paying for a war. Just run a little math. We'll say that's $3 trillion of it. We lost like $1 trillion on the surplus. So where has this other, liberally, $5 trillion come from? $6 trillion.
I mean, I don't want to speak to that number just because it was kind of just like postulated.
Yeah, but I'm just doing it off Bush's numbers, and naturally, because of inflation, it's going to be a little more. So we'll say half of it is a result of Bush's policies. I don't see how the other 4.5, where that, how that's Bush's fault. That it has doubled the national debt.
The amount of money that we're spending is definitely a problem. I think that where the error falls is that on either side of the issue, we blame each other. And in reality, it's some mix of both of it. And
I would agree with that. Republicans often talk about cutting taxes while raising, defense spending, stuff like that. While, on the other side, Democrats want to raise taxes while spending. So there's definitely some bipartisan blame for that. I think at the end of the day, Congress needs to sit down and figure out, the government as a whole needs to say, hey, we're at a point where in 2020, if we keep spending like this, our interest payments are going to equal our interest payments on the national debt are going to equal what we spend on defense every year. And that is unsustainable debt. I mean, I think that needs to be reversed immediately.
All right, shifting to another topic, do you think that President Obama has taken too much time off on vacations?
I don't know the actual vacation days. However, I know just golfing days alone, he's gone for 270 golfing days. Now, that's 9 months of his presidency spent on the links.
So that's way too much?
Golfing, yeah, it's way too much for any president.
All right. Let me talk to you about
Bush's golfing.
The former
Here
president.
We go.
Yes.
Yeah.
President Bush took an astounding 533 days off, which is a whole lot more than Obama's, like 200?
270.
270.
No, I didn't say days off. I just said days golfing. I don't know his whole vacation.
Well, even if we say 270, that every day he played golf, he wasn't able to do any more work. That's still a lot less than President Bush. And actually, President Bush, in the first 8 months of his presidency, the 8 months before 9/11, he took off at least a third of all the days that he was president. He was on vacation.
Before 9/11. Okay. So I just said golfing days. That doesn't include his lavish expenses, his lavish vacations to Hawaii, his like $50 million trip to South America, South Africa, all these vacations everywhere. I'm just talking about golfing days alone. He spent 9 months golfing. So yeah, we can talk about Bush taking a third off before 9/11 when we were still talking about Y2K or whatever was. I don't know. I was 8, so I don't know what's going on then. But I don't think the two are comparable when it's, 270 days alone golfing. While, yeah, he took much more days off. If they took equal time off, I agree. I don't think either president should spend that much time off when you're the head of the country.
So from all the sources that I looked at, I couldn't find one that said that President Obama has taken more than 250 days off. But if we're talking about the effectiveness
The
of
source I use had a list, an itemized and locations.
if we're trying to make an estimation of how effective a president was based off of how much vacation time they took, then by far President Bush is the worst president in history if you're doing it from a vacation standpoint.
I think that's quite an overestimation, but I think they took very similar. We'll have to go back and look at how many vacation days, but just golf alone, unacceptable either way.
And with that, we've come to the end of the show. I hope that you've enjoyed watching it half as much as we've enjoyed making it for you.
You can find updates about Spectrum and other TealTV programming at UNCW TealTV on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Episodes can be found at our YouTube channel at the UNCW TealTV.
If you have any ideas for what you want to see next on Spectrum, comment below.
And as always, from everyone here at TealTV, thank you for watching. All right,
See you.
let's pop champagne.